Hi, welcome back to another episode of Ballads, A Tinker's Dozen, the video book. Today we're going to read the fourth section of the first chapter. So make yourself comfortable, and if you're ready, we'll begin. Here we go. One day, 3 years later, Martha was sitting in the rocking chair singing to her baby, who was now an energetic toddler. A silver Ford drove up the driveway. It was Silky. He stopped at the bottom of the steps up to the porch and got out of the big car. He hadn't changed much. He was still dressed to the nines, and he once again took off his fedora, and just like the first time they had met, doffed his hat to her and bowed just the least little bit, his powder blue eyes never leaving hers. "I'm still just a man at night, Martha," he said, "and I still rob banks by day. But here I am the father of your child," and he reached inside his suit and pulled out an envelope and tossed it into her lap. "So give me my son and take the money to pay for your time." Martha opened the thick envelope and looked inside. It was filled with bills. "That's not enough, Silky," she hissed at him. "It's not nearly enough. The famous bank robber gave me a child, tossed me away, and now wants his son back. The nights after we robbed those banks, you held me close, Silky. You loved me. Make love to me again, Silky, just once more." Silky looked down to the dirt and held his hat in his hand. "I can't do that, Martha. Just give me my son and I'll take him away with me and teach him all I know." Martha felt a white-hot anger rise in her, and in the few small parts of her that didn't hate Silky, she felt her heart breaking. She stood up and slowly walked into the house with her child. She was gone for a few minutes, but when she returned, she held their little boy's little hand in one of hers and a suitcase in her other. Martha looked at her son's face and marveled again, as she had every night since he had been born, how much he looked like his father. She lifted him up and brought her baby's lips to hers, and she kissed him gently, lingering to smell his sweet smell one last time. She held the boy then close to her chest and walked down the steps. Silky reached out for the boy, and Martha gave her son to the robber, being very careful not to let her hand touch his. "What's his name, Martha?" Silky asked, gazing at the little boy like he was a stack of $100 bills. "Baby," she answered. "Just Baby." Silky nodded and turned to the car, about to leave. He opened the passenger door and set the little boy on the seat and put the suitcase on the floor in front of him. And then he turned around and said, "Once we're out of your life, Martha, you'll forget all about us. You'll fall in love and marry. And sure as I am a highwayman, I know that the man that you marry will hunt me down and kill both me and our child." And then Silky walked around to the other side of the Ford, got in, roared off down the driveway, turned right onto the road, and disappeared from her life forever. Later that week, Martha's mother asked her to take the wagon into town and pick up some things at the mercantile. Martha hitched up the mule and set off. When she got to town, she parked the wagon in front of the store and hitched the mule to the post. She walked inside, said hello to Mrs. Gibbs, walked up to the counter, and stood behind a tall gentleman who was finishing paying for his order. "That'll be $3, Mr. Cowley," Mrs. Gibbs said to the man. The man paid, took his package, and turned around. He was taller than Martha, over 6 feet. He wore a conservative brown suit with a white carnation in his buttonhole and a Homburg hat. He was good-looking, Martha thought, with deep brown eyes and a bushy handlebar mustache. "Ma'am," he said, looking Martha directly in the eye before nodding his head in respectful greeting. "Oh, Martha," Mrs. Gibbs said, always eager to do a little matchmaking. "This is Mr. Cowley, Samuel Cowley. He's our new deputy. Mr. Cowley, this is Miss Martha Canary." "Mr. Cowley," Martha said, unable to hide her smile, "I'm pleased to meet you." Mr. Cowley replied, "The pleasure's mine, miss. I hope that I will see you in church this Sunday." Martha might have blushed at his boldness, but she liked it. "I'm sure that you will, sir." Mr. Cowley turned to go. "Good day, miss," he said with a smile. "Good day, Mr. Cowley," she replied. It took Mrs. Gibbs an hour to collect all of the items on Martha's list, add them to the Canary's bill, and bundle them up for Martha. Martha wanted to get out of the store, away from Mrs. Gibbs' nattering and gossip, and enjoy thinking about that handsome Mr. Cowley on the long ride home. She decided to carry all of her packages out to the wagon in one trip, a lazy man's load, her mother would have called it, and she almost got to the wagon without mishap. But as she stood behind the wagon, about to put the first packages into the wagon's bed, the 5 pounds of flour in its pretty patterned cotton sack fell off the top and into the dirt. Martha would have cursed if she hadn't been standing in the middle of Main Street. "Let me help you with that, Miss Canary," a strong, almost familiar masculine voice said from behind her. And it was that Mr. Cowley. He bent to pick up the flour sack and placed it carefully in the bed of the wagon, and then he helped Martha put the other packages securely in place for their journey back to the farm. Martha felt her heart beat a little faster. "Why, thank you, Mr. Cowley," she said. "My pleasure, Miss Canary," he smiled and tipped his hat to her before he walked away. Over the next few months, Martha and Mr. Cowley ran into each other quite a bit, at church and in town, almost as though someone was arranging these opportunities for the two to meet. And as two people who find themselves meeting more and more often and spending more and more of their time together often do, Martha and Mr. Cowley fell in love, and Martha began to call Mr. Cowley Samuel, and Samuel began to call Miss Canary Martha. And once that happened, Samuel came to Martha's home to ask Martha's father for her hand. Mr. Canary thoroughly approved of Mr. Cowley and was secretly thrilled that his spinster daughter, whose life had turned shockingly tawdry for a time, was engaged to a pillar of the community, and asked him when the two planned to marry. "I cannot imagine spending more of my life without Martha by my side, sir," Samuel told his soon-to-be father-in-law. "We would like to exchange our vows in a month or so, if that is acceptable to you, sir." Mr. Canary smiled and nodded his assent. The wedding itself was attended by a few family members and close friends of the bride and groom, but the reception held at the Canary's farm was attended by the entire town. The eating, drinking, and dancing continued until early the next morning, hours after the bride and groom had slipped away to their honeymoon cottage back in town. The newlyweds were very happy. Martha cooked and cleaned and doted on her new husband. Samuel went to work at the sheriff's office about 2 blocks from their cottage and returned every night with flowers in his hand, a healthy appetite for Martha's cooking, and an eager anticipation of doting on Martha all night. Martha and Samuel lived a honeymoon-like life for 2 or 3 years.